Yeah. Do you think that there's any world where that comes into our world in Division Three? Do you think there's any way that trickles down
It's
to where
already
it's
here.
benefiting? Yeah.
It's here. There's
Yeah.
there's NIL in Division 3 already. There's at least 6 schools that I know of with confirmation from people within their programs and their department that have north of $250,000 to $300,000 of NIL money for their football program.
Today's guest on the Left Hash Call is one of the most respected leaders in Division III football. Not just because of the amount of winning that he does, it's because of his influence. He is a 4-time Midwest Conference champion, former chair of the Division III Football Committee, a current member of the AFCA Board of Trustees. He's led at the conference level, national championship level, and serves as an assistant vice president and director of athletics at Lake Forest College, the head football coach at Lake Forest College, Coach Jim Catanzaro, better known as Coach Cat. How you doing today, man?
Doing great, man. Appreciate you having me on. The weather's turning here in the Midwest, and it's starting to get the itch for spring football going a little bit. So it's a pretty good time out here, man. Excited to be on with you.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Well, since the season's wrapped up, obviously hammering home recruiting, but what's life looked like for you lately? Obviously, we just talked about it, balancing being obviously a head coach, also in the assistant vice president, director of athletics. What is going on every single day? I bet it's a wild day in the life for you.
Yeah, the question's what's not going on. So we had our basketball game last night out of Monmouth, and I drove out to that to watch the team. It was our women's basketball coach's last game. She's retiring, and after 17 years here and 40 years coaching, I wanted to be there for that. And so got to see our teams put up a good fight. And then, it's budget time at the administrative level. So putting together a budget for all 28 sports in our department, travel, equipment, facilities, you name it, we're doing it. We're going through a brand reveal. We've got a new brand coming out. We're gonna have new logos, all that good stuff that'll get revealed in March. And so there's been a lot. There's not enough time to sleep, but sleep's the cousin of death. So we'll worry about that later on in life. But we're doing well, man. We're doing well.
Is there anything we can know about the new brand, the new logos, or is that totally is that under wraps at the moment?
There's some really cool features about it. There is a nod to our past, but there's definitely some very new. There'll be some very new, and I think our student athletes and our alums are going to be really, really excited with 2 of we'll call them the secondary logos that we have.
Yeah.
The primary logo, the Paul that we've had for a long time, also got a facelift, and so I think people are going to be pretty darn excited about it. It's going to be good.
I'm excited for that. Well, we'll have to wait and see what goes on there. But before we kind of get into some of the current things going on around Division III and obviously Lake Forest, I want to go back to when you first got to Lake Forest and you took over this program. When you first got there, I'm curious what were some of your non-negotiables that you knew that maybe not necessarily wanted to overhaul, change, and wholesale everything, but what did you know right away that you wanted to implement and establish right away?
Yeah, so I was kind of interesting. I was here as a defensive coordinator for 3 years, and we'd been really good on defense, but we hadn't put the whole team together. And then when the head coach decided to resign and they turned to me, there were a couple of things that I really felt we needed to look towards, and character was number one. How were we going to become a resilient football team? I felt that we were kind of front runner-ish in our makeup, that if we were out in front, we were good. If we were behind, we had a hard time fighting there and believing we were going to win the game. So that resiliency piece was really big on my end. The second thing was I wanted to make sure that we got away from this offense versus defense mentality that was in our program. We had even before I got there, a conference championship team that had, a guy named Casey Erlacher, Brian's younger brother, who's an All-American middle linebacker, Kevin Crable, a bunch of other dudes. And the defense gave up 8 points per game for the whole year, but everybody talking about how bad the offense was. And I was like, but you won a championship, so why is it still an offense versus defense thing? And so we worked really, really hard and really diligent to get rid of that. And that was something early on we had to work towards. And then, our previous head coach had really talked about earning things. Everything had to be earned. And I believed to that, but I wanted to show that there were things you could earn other than victories, because, when you're not winning at a high level, it's hard to say the tangible wins are what are they, and getting people to buy into why they're putting that effort into. And so coming up with a number of different things for our players to go around that was it. And we wanted to be tough. And I don't shy away from using that word even now. I know it's kind of one of those words that some teams don't like to hear. Or, we're going to try to be tough in everything we do and tough on ourselves with a higher standard in-house than what anybody's going to have outside for us.
I love that. And, now, and obviously, you said you coached the defense right away, but now you're the offense coordinator as well. Was that a challenge for you? I'm sure there was some carryover as far as things that you want to look like in the game planning perspective. But what were some of the biggest challenges with kind of being a defensive minded guy, but now obviously calling the offense?
Scripting for practice takes twice as long on offense as it does on defense. Making sure you got the right personnel, the right hash. Like the number of times I put FIB in and I didn't mean to was wild that first couple of weeks. So I think some of those kinds of things really that perspective. But to be honest with you, I took my defensive mentality of what were the things I hated to defend. And those were the things we really focused in on. So we're a double tight end team a lot, or, we'll use 12 personnel, but being a 4 wide look. And those were the things that as a defensive coordinator, I used to hate. And so bringing in some of those things, as a defensive coordinator, we were a 3-4 team, but we ran a lot of 4-man front. And so, when I see teams that run an odd front, I'm like, okay, I know what I want to do against you this week. If they're a 4-man front with, 2 linebacker box that doesn't break, I want to do these things. And so, I think that I was able to bring that approach and we simplified on offense instead of being super complex. But we've had kind of the same offensive playbook terminology since I took over as a head coach in 2009. So we came in, this was our playbook. This is what we're going to do. Now we may run page 34 more than we run page 10 now, but it's the same terminology. So if I brought a kid in that I didn't even coach on offense, I said, all right, draw Baltimore, they're going to know exactly what that is. And it hasn't changed in the entire time. So I think that, creating a language for our program that was really strong and it stood the test of time, I thought was really good. But to be honest with you, that reinvention is probably what got me back into coaching. I was on a plan coming out of COVID. I'd become the AD the first time. And we had kind of like a 2-year window. Hey, you're going to coach for 2 more years and just be the athletic director. And I had so much fun my first year on offense because defense had kind of gotten this. I just do what I do. And I kept doing what I did and it was being successful. Going over to offense gave me a new challenge. It provided kind of a reinvigoration to my coaching. And that's why I actually stepped out of being the AD at that point, only to turn around 3 years later to be the AD again. So, it was just a vacation or sabbatical, I guess.
That reminds me a lot of Coach Wissing up there at River Falls because he was obviously an offensive guy forever, and now he's obviously the defensive coordinator and just crushing it up there. I feel like when you have both perspectives, you know what each side hates to do and hates to go against, and certainly feels like that is a successful recipe at times if you can get both of those perspectives. Even see like Coach Saban, like when he was obviously still coaching, like he was a defensive guy, always had been, but he spent a lot of time on offense because he knew what defenses just hated going against. But I'm curious from your perspective as the head coach, what has changed the most for you as far as, I guess, maybe how things have evolved as far as maybe the actual football being played? Obviously, recruiting and transfer portal, all that good stuff is a completely different animal. But from the actual football being played in the culture and what's changed the most to you in the last 10 to 15 years?
Yeah, I think a couple things that stand out. I mean, how often do you go to a Division III game and now the players on the sideline are doing chants and cheers and stuff like that? 15 years ago that never happened. Now it's pretty commonplace, which I actually think is awesome. It brings energy to the game. I think on the field schemes, offensively, RPOs change things a lot. And whether they're being enforced the way they should be or not is not to be discussed at this point about linemen being downfield. But I think that I'm going to get on my Nick Saban soapbox if we go there.
Right, yeah.
I think that the ability of lower division teams, the Division II, Division III realm, to pass the football at an elite level is something that's definitely a change. I remember going against a young man named Justin Pingle, or Scott Pingle was the wide receiver and Justin Peary was the quarterback at Westminster back in 1996. And they were the first iteration of the air raid. I think Scott's probably got half the records in Division III still for receptions.
Right.
And then the next year, our team started running it. And here I am, a 230-pound middle linebacker who was built to take on fullbacks and ISO and power, not to cover guys on the, downfield passing game. And I think that the evolution in Division III of more talented quarterbacks, more talented wide receivers, again, with the way our spring football goes, where it's the underwear Olympics out there for the most part, I think that you see the passing game at the smaller college football level being a lot more successful. And then the other part is just the size of the players currently playing Division III. If you look at the attention to the weight room and the attention to strength, speed development, it's why you're seeing guys get poached and jump up a level, because they're doing that at the Division III level now. Whereas in the '90s, I had some pretty big dudes on my team, I thought, but compared to some of the guys I'm coaching now, they would never play offensive line. We'd still have a 215-pound offensive guard and a 220-pound center in 1990, but like now, those guys would never even make the roster as an offensive lineman. And so I think that the combination of those things, and then the year-round approach to it. I mean, I'm probably a dinosaur at this point, where I was a multi-sport athlete in college, and I don't know that very many guys can do that anymore. The change of the winter calendar, it's hard to be a football, basketball guy anymore. Maybe you could do a fall sport, spring sport, but I think that the commitment that we had in the late days or the early days of my coaching of guys playing multiple sports, I think that that's kind of faded away from a lot of Division III institutions where it's year-round football now, and so the stakes get a little bit higher when you do things like that.
And now flipping that from the recruiting side of things, and how this whole thing, this matrix of college football, I'm sure that's probably been the biggest jump and the biggest difference over the years as far as how you recruit guys, how you utilize the transfer portal. Obviously, I know you guys spend a lot of time down there in Arizona. I was fortunate enough to, I believe, 2024, I was at your camp down there in Arizona, and obviously a lot of guys are on your roster from Arizona. But I guess backing up just a little bit, talk about the recruiting aspect of it and how things have changed so much. And I'd kind of like to hear, what you were doing, back in the '90s versus compared to what you're doing now as far as recruiting.
Yeah, so I tell everybody our recruiting now is more like it was in Division II, where I was in the early 2000s, than it is what it was in Division III in the late 2000s. So when I first came to Lake Forest, the Midwest Conference was one of like 6 conferences in the country that didn't allow off-campus recruiting. We literally couldn't go out to the camps or anything like that. We had to make all of our calls basically from our desk at that point. And, that changed to where now I'm on the road probably 45 to 50 days a year as the head coach. My assistant coaches are out on the road. We're traveling like what Division II was back then. Well, now the Division II guys are staying home because they're babysitting the transfer portal and trying to keep their guys. So they're the ones not going on the road. And this year in December, out in Arizona, I was out there for 2 weeks, and I don't know that I saw a Division II school that entire time. And, you start to see some D3 schools, whereas about 6 years ago, there'd be 40 schools trying to get into Chandler High School. And now it's like, I'm looking at Coach Wisdom saying, like, where's everybody else? And he's like, yeah, they're all watching the portal instead of looking for high school kids. So I think that focus is quite a bit different. We're still a scholastic recruiting model. We're still recruiting from the high schools. We're not super big in the portal one way or the other. We've only had 2 guys go into the portal in the last 5 years to go play someplace else, and one was to go do track at a Division I school. And then we've probably on average maybe 2 guys a year from the portal coming into us. So,
and from your perspective, obviously, like being a River Falls guy, being a Simpson guy, like we've had a lot of Arizona guys over the past. But you, I mean, it's totally a different ball game for you. I mean, I know you're down there quite a bit. What was the initial reaction of why we should go down there, why you should spend so much time down there, why we should do a camp down there, why we should have a dang game down there at the end of the day? Talk a little about where Arizona came from and why that's such a big deal to you.
Yeah, it kind of started because Chicago is over-recruited. The number of schools that come to Chicagoland and recruit the suburbs, recruit the Catholic League, whatever it is. I mean, the guys in Chicago can get in-state tuition at state schools in Wisconsin. I still haven't figured out how that's legal, but they can. And so, that competition for the same kids, we're banging our head against the wall trying to get some of those kids, especially when we weren't winning a lot of football games. When you're a 3-win team going against teams that are nationally ranked, you're not going to do well to get that linebacker that makes a huge difference for you and is a guy that they're waiting for junior and senior year to play for. And so we started to look at some areas outside. We had recruited Florida pretty heavily before that. The retention rate on Florida kids was kind of mixed. Some years it was really good, some years it wasn't. And so we kind of looked at each other and said, where could we go and recruit? And at the scholarship level, when I was there, I recruited the junior colleges out in Arizona pretty heavily. And so I started to call some people and just say, hey, where did non-JUCO kids go? Like, where do they go play college football? And like, oh, ASU or U of A. I'm like, no. I mean, the small college guys, like, they don't. I go, what do you mean they don't? Like, they don't. And so come to realize that at that time, there wasn't even NAI out there. Now there's a couple NAI schools, but there's no D2, no D3, no NAI. They didn't know what we were. So we started phone recruiting it, got one kid a tight end. The reason we got him is because his grandfather lived 15 minutes from our campus. Like, it wasn't anything like we did this great job recruiting his grandpa did. And so he comes. The next year, we actually get a kid out of NCSA from Arizona, and his dad had played for Frank Kush at Arizona State. He comes, starts watching our stuff. He's like, this is what college football is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be what the Division Ones are turning into. And this is before NIL. And so Brock comes up, and so his dad gets a media pass and starts taking photographs at high school football games. And he would get them developed overnight and fly him up with him. So, he'd fly up with him and bring him to me and go over all the kids that he saw that he thought could play for us. So then I'd start calling the high school coaches and be like, hey, I got a dad. He's recommended this kid, number 52. What can you tell me about him? What are his grades? All that kind of stuff. And that next year, we got 8 kids. And then the next year, I went down there for 3 days and met at about 15, 16 schools in those 3 days. We get another 8 kids. I'm like, well, what happened if I stayed a whole week? Next year, we get 12 kids. And so it just kind of kept going, and the kids stay and they love it. And the coaches appreciate that I've always been the guy that goes down there. I never turned it over to an assistant coach. It was always me as the head coach. They appreciate the fact that I keep coming back and keep getting kids, and they graduate from us. I think some of the other schools that they were getting kids from, kids were going to small NAIA schools in the middle of nowhere up in the Dakotas or something, and they graduated about 25%. And so they liked that our kids were staying and getting good jobs. And the camp actually came out of COVID. The high school association, the coaches association down there approached me. Dana Zupke, who's at Pinnacle, was the president. And he goes, look, nobody's coming out here to recruit because coaches can't travel. We feel like we're a whole calendar year behind in recruiting. We didn't even have, I hate to say it, they said, we didn't even have COVID down here. They didn't stop doing anything. They played football. They did everything. And so they said, would you host a camp like the one you have in Chicago out here? I'm like, sure. I don't know how many people will come to it, but I'd be happy to host a camp. So I started, calling people like Coach Martinez over at Simpson and Coach Walker up at River Falls and all the other D3 and D2 coaches that I knew recruited Arizona. And I said, look, if I have the camp on this day, it's the end of the 2-week, jamboree showcases they have down there. Would you stay an extra day to come to the camp? And everybody's like, absolutely. So that first year, I think we had 40 coaches. I think we had 350 kids come. And then it's grown now where we cap it at 600 kids because we just don't have space. And I want them to get the reps. So it's that was their intention, their idea, and then we just continued to make it a little bit bigger and kind of bring the experience of running college mega camps to them and get that done. So it's been. Is
there one school more than the others that's been the kindest to Lake Forest? Is there one school that you can point that like we've gotten the most kids from there?
Oh man, it's probably either Chandler, Higley, or Centennial. I think we've had like double digits from all 3 of those schools. And even in this year's recruiting class, we got a kid from each one of those schools at least. So, those 3 schools have been very consistent. When you look at the guys who helped turn our program around from being kind of consistent 7-3, 8-2, and winning conference championships, that first year, I think we had 4 guys from Chandler. I think we had 5 guys from Centennial, including AJ Jackson, who's pretty darn good for us. And I think we had probably 4 guys from Higley as well. So I think that those schools have done great by us. But what's funny is if you looked at our team this year and you looked at who our captains were and who our all conference players were, and we had guys from Bradshaw Mountain, which is up in the hills and up near Flagstaff. Was our starting nose guard and team captain. We've got our team captain wide receivers from Florence. So we recruit all this. Like, we don't care if they're big school or small school. We just want the guys that are tough and grizzled and ready to be good football players.
I liked going up. I recruited Flagstaff and Prescott and going up. I liked going up there because there wasn't a lot of people that wanted to go up. A lot of coaches that made their way up there. They always wanted the kids to come to them, but they didn't really want to go up there. So I always liked recruiting up there. My college roommate, he was a Hamilton grad. Now he coaches at Chandler. So got to be really familiar with Arizona. And I will say, I get why you guys go down there so much and get skill players and even offensive linemen too, because like they just do that all year round. Like that's what they do. I'm like, man, I'd probably take a kid that, I know specialization is becoming more popular, but I'm like, man, I could really take the quarterback that's got like 1,000 more reps over the course of a calendar year than maybe the kid that went and wrestled for a year. I mean, I have zero. I love when a kid wrestles or plays basketball, whatever the case is. But man, it's like that extra development you get is pretty nuts. But and then now one of the other things that what I really want to kind of pick your brain about is your role, with the NCAA football committee and then also the AFCA. First, where did that eventually come from, and when did you know you kind of wanted to get involved in this administrative, higher ups as far as helping out the division and having a better view for how this thing should actually run? How did that first come about?
Yeah, I think once I got comfortable in my role here that I was, okay, I'm a pretty established football coach. I've done some things, won a few games. Those first 3 years when we were 7-23, I wasn't trying to do anything for anybody. I was trying to win. But then you win a conference championship and your program gets stable. I was the guy that was sitting in a room, much like a lot of coaches, and we're listening to somebody present, and I'm like, that's BS. That is absolute. I can't believe that we're talking about doing it that way. And I felt that, like, why am I not in the room then? If I'll just go get in the room and I'll make the argument, because the place we're receiving the information, not discussing it. And so saw an opportunity, was approached to be on the regional advisory committee. We used to rank everybody in the RAC rankings, where we had to decide who was going to be in the playoffs. That led to me getting asked if I would like to be a coach on the national committee. I said, absolutely. What do we do besides pick the tournament field? They started telling me, and I was like, yes, this is the room that I want to be in. These are the conversations I want to be a part of. I want there to be a coach advocating. At that time, there were 8 people on the RAC, and 7 of them were administrators. And 3 or 4 of them had never coached football or been around the game of football. And I'm like, these people don't understand our game as much as they need to. And, JP Williams, who's been the chair or the NCAA rep for Division III football for a long, long time now, he and I started to have really big conversations about, like, where else can I make a difference? Here's, the concussion data task force that the Sports Science Institute went on, like, well, if there's 2 practices in a day, there's going to be more rests for concussion. We're like, well, yeah, no duh. Like, but what they didn't realize is that coaches had already moved their second practice in 2 days to a non-full padded practice. And so they found out as soon as they made it where you could have full pad back to back to back days, but you couldn't have doubles, there were more concussions. I'm like, yeah, because we'd already fixed that. I wanted to be in the room to give the perspective of a coach, somebody who'd played Division III football and believes in it. And that led to me being the chair. And so for 2 years, I served as the chair. And, I've got some death threats I could show you from teams not getting into play from some of their fans, screenshots on Twitter, shout out to schools in Ohio. But it was great, man. I had fun doing it. Oversaw the last game at that time in Salem. Then we moved it to Shenandoah down in Texas for 2 years, and that was a pretty cool experience. It wasn't one I voted for. I voted against moving it, but we moved it down there, and they did a great job hosting us. And now I think having teams have a chance to play in multiple championship venues over a 4-year window is something that the guys who play in back, I think the North Central guys would tell you that's pretty awesome. So they part of that, and then because of my time there, I really think it was because I was on all the podcasts, right? I was on the D3 football one. I was on Frank's for the championship unveils and stuff like that. And I would speak at the different events of, like, hey, this is what's going on at the NCAA level. And I was in the know. I think that when it came time to nominate somebody from Division III to go on to the AFCA Board of Trustees, I really think that's how I got voted on. I don't think I didn't politic for it or anything like that. It just all of a sudden my name was out there. And so I got on the AFCA Board of Trustees, and that's been a lot of fun. It puts me in a room with, right now, I think we've got 16 Division 1A football coaches, and then 2 from every other level of football down. And so when we talk about our problems, we've got some great advocates in the Division I realm that have been on that board. Craig Bull, who's the executive director, was at North Dakota State when they were Division II before he went up to Wyoming and went to 1AA and then to Wyoming. James Franklin, when he was at Penn State and now at Virginia Tech, he's a Division II grad from Kutztown, and so he understands what we're doing and all that kind of stuff. And I just see all these coaches that appreciate what we're doing, and I think some of them, if it weren't for the paycheck, would trade places with us in a heartbeat. They'd rather coach Division III football and what we stand for, but they're not willing to turn down that $1-point-something million paycheck. So I don't know if that's what Walker got for winning the championship, but I know I haven't seen that salary. State schools have rules, right? They got rules.
Yeah,
So
there's a few rules, but with where things are currently now, I'm curious what your perspective on the playoffs right now. Obviously, there's been a couple of changes, especially this year. There was a couple of buys, a couple more buys, and more teams in there. From your perspective, are we at a good place right now, or is there still more work to be done?
So I think we're at a fantastic point. And I'm a little bit biased here. I think that there's a couple of things that have come out of this that some people, especially in power conferences, don't want to hear from me. One, we've got the extra at larges. We've got more teams in than we've ever gotten in. When we went from 32 to 40, getting those extra 8 at large bids really put people in a position where it's like, hey, if you're not in the top 14, top 13 at large teams, do you really have a strong complaint about whether or not you're in the tournament? Okay, well now we're going to talk about seeding. I think having the top 8 protected is something that's been really, really important. There's always a human element, right? There's always the human element of like, if I put 2 teams on paper against each other, who should win the game? And we as coaches, correct, 9 out of 10 times, or sometimes 10 out of 10 times, that team's going to win. But you got to let the teams that have earned the right, based on whatever criteria we set, to do the things that are necessary. I think that there's still some confusion. I just being at the AFCA meeting this past January, there is a confusion among even coaches of what the criteria for the MPI ranking is. And I'm like, it's pretty easy. Like,
Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah.
I think there are seriously people that are still like, why am I not in? Why are we in? Why did we get 4 WIAC teams in? Why did we not get those are conversations I feel like are actively being had.
Well, I feel the misconception is that they keep wanting to talk about strength of schedule. It's in there. It's already in the equation. It's not being ignored. Winning percentage matters, right? We've seen through that. And in the first year, we were kind of one of the beneficiaries as a school. We were 10-0, and usually the first year we were 10-0, we got sent to St. John's, who was the number 1 seed in the tournament. That doesn't seem like a real fair seeding, regardless of anything else. The next year we were 9-1, we got sent to North Central. So it's like we knew we were going, like the Midwest Conference was getting sent to the top team in the tournament back-to-back years, regardless of who they played or what their record was. Now, because of the protected 8, we got the first round bye, had a chance to play a team that played in the first round. At halftime, we're 14-13 in the lead against a team that goes to the national semifinals before our starting quarterback gets knocked out of the game. If we keep him, maybe we can do some other things. Bethel was pretty darn good that year. I don't know. And so you get that situation, but the MPI, you need to win your games. You need to play teams with a winning record. Only your top 5 games count. So your bottom 5 teams that you play, other than for a win, do not count towards your NPI being elevated. If the 6th team you play is above 500 and it's going to help your rating, now that counts. If your 7th team is up there, so here's how we get the WIAC in, right? You get 4 teams from the WIAC. They all play these extra non-conference games against good opponents. So now they were having 6 or 7 games count towards their score. Whereas if you're a team that has a 9-game conference schedule, you only get 1 non-conference game. It is impossible for you to have more than 6 teams above 500, because you're automatically going to have there's first place is 10-0, second place is 9-1, so on and so forth. So for me, the one advantage that the Wisconsin League has over everybody else is the number of non-conference games that they get to play. It helps their rankings go up because they can go play a 7-3 team or an 8-2 team or a 9-1 team from another conference, and that helps everybody in their league score if they get the win. Losing against a high-level team doesn't hurt your NPI, other than you have a loss on your winning percentage. It doesn't hurt your strength of schedule. It helps your strength of schedule, does all those things. So the question that continually kind of gets argued right now is what's best for a team or a league in terms of size. So at one point, everybody's trying to get these really big leagues, right? And getting, 10 teams, but it was 9 because they wanted it for ease of scheduling. In the current NPI, having more non-conference games is an automatic advantage, so long as you can get Division III teams to play you. And that's where that piece kind of comes in balance with, I think it was with lacrosse last year, had to go play a D2 school or 2 of them. And
they had to play 9 games last year. They just had, right.
Somebody's got to want to play you. And this is where, I have talks with coaches, like coaches will play you if they think that if you're going to respect them, right? If you're going to try to run the score up and you're going to leave your starters in, And I get it. There's travel parties and all those things, but that's not going to get teams that are on the lower end of the strength of schedule realm to want to play up opponents when they leave the game down 80-0 and starters weren't until the fourth quarter because, well, I got to protect my quarterback stats because he's going to be all region or something like that. Like it just doesn't fly. So again, playing teams with a winning record, but teams who have more non-conference games have a distinct advantage. And then the second place you can get advantage, you saw this 2 years ago, was if you have a conference championship setup. Because St. John's versus Bethel, they beat Bethel twice. Bethel will still had a pretty good strength of schedule, but St. John's MPI went up really high because they beat Bethel twice. And it counted as 2 separate games, not as a 1.5 or anything like that. So, again, it's the top 5 games, and then anything else only gets counted if it helps you. And that's where I think coaches think that, Lake Forest got an advantage because they beat Lawrence by 70 this year. That doesn't help us at all. That doesn't even get figured into the equation for the strength of schedule part. Now, it does for the win percentage, right? Which wouldn't matter if we won by 1 or 20. It counts towards win percentage, but everything else, strength of schedule bonus stuff, is based on your top 5, and then only if it helps you go up from that point.
And so teams that maybe not by choice, but teams that end up playing a D2 school like lacrosse did that does nothing for them, correct?
They never played. They never even played that game in the eyes of the NCAA MPI.
Yeah, so you're almost better off like playing a team that maybe doesn't have as good a strength of schedule or is not as good, and just get that win percentage. Or is there an advantage at all of just saying, hey, we're not going to play so we don't have a lot, like, or what is the kind of the correlation there?
Yeah, I mean, there's different things we're valuing here, right? I'd say it's more important to play 10 games than play 9, just for the play experience. But in terms of the NPI, playing a Division II school, winning, losing, not playing a game that day doesn't matter. It's the exact same. So you playing that game, and they beat a Division II school, and it does nothing for them if they were to lost the Division II school. It does nothing for them if they didn't play a game that day. It does nothing to them. So it's really, unless you're playing a Division III team, it doesn't matter. And here's the thing: even if you lost that game to the Division II school, it doesn't figure into your winning percentage. Your winning percentage is only against the Division III opponents. So you're 9-0. If you finish 9-1 with a loss to a Division II school, you're 9-0 in the eyes of the Division III NPI. So your winning percentage doesn't change. So that's why I think playing the 10th game would be better than not playing.
Right, because it essentially does the same thing for you with or without it. So
basically an exhibition game in the eyes of the MPI.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And one of the other things that I'm curious about is some of the rules that were brought to the table this year at the NCAA level, and also obviously that was talked about with the AFCA, particularly the 5th year of eligibility being tossed around. Obviously, that got shut down pretty quickly. One of the main reasons, I believe, was because the mission statement in Division III is a traditional 4-year education. Am I right in assuming that's kind of the main reason why that shut down? Were there conversations of maybe this is why we should do this, why we shouldn't do that? Or was there any sort of more dialogue behind that other than just that piece?
Yeah, I mean, that thing was really active on the floor. It was, at the NCAA, that was very, very active for debate. You could see a bit of a divide between private schools and public schools a little bit with that. I think, when you're talking about $75,000 a year for an extra year versus, $12,000 a year for an extra year, it's a little bit different. I do think that because the mission statement of it being a predominantly 4-year experience had just been ratified in the last 2 years, that there wasn't a huge appetite, but the vote was, it wasn't like it was a slam dunk one way or the other going onto the floor. I think everybody went into the debate not knowing which way it was going to go. And I think that there were a couple of conferences that really stood on the table, if you will, and said, we're against this and we're going to vote against it. And I think that helped make the decision for some other schools that thought they were like-minded with those institutions. So, I think that we have this weird thing where Division I doesn't know what their eligibility is. Division II doesn't know what their eligibility is. And so until all that really gets squared away, I don't think that we should be first and making a change to a fifth year or something like that. There's a reason why some of the other levels of football are not. They're spending all their time in lawsuits and court cases. I think right now we're actually probably the safest from those things because we are beholden to our mission of a 4-year education, a 4-year experience. What I would think would be valuable for us to really consider is that if someone were to play 4 years in the Division III level, they could have 1 year at the next level. If that was how they wanted to get to a fifth year, I think that would be okay. I think the trying to extend college experiences for the benefit of the institution, not necessarily for the benefit of the player, I think is a critical thing to keep at the forefront of that. Again, I still think we're educators. I still think that we're here for transformational experiences, not transactional. I know at some schools, NIL and that stuff's starting to creep in a little bit more, but watching the relationship difference at Division I with coaches and players versus what it was 10 years ago is again why a lot of those Division I coaches wishes they could trade chairs with me on a daily basis other than on payday. So
when you're in those conversations and you're talking to those P4 coaches, I mean, you're in these meetings, does it feel like there's some alarm bells ringing with the NIL? Obviously, that doesn't have a lot to do with our division and the transfer portal and kids leaving a lot. Like what? I guess from where you sit, obviously being Division III coach, like where does it seem like things are headed in that world?
yeah, they're definitely not happy. I don't think they enjoy it. I think that the fact that they have to talk to agents instead of to players directly, I mean, we had this experience with the kid that went in the portals, Arizona kid that we recruited. We called him. He was fourth team or so at a Power 5, Power 4 school. So we call him and he gets in the portal. We call him and say, yeah, coach, I appreciate the call, but you got to talk to my agent. Like, dude, you're like fourth team there. Like, you're not a starter. He's like, yeah, you got to call my agent. So we call his agent because I'm curious at this point, right? Like, I'm just curious. Yeah, unless there's $50,000 on the table for him, he's not even willing to take conversations. He ends up at another P4 school, got $100,000, and he's remained on the third or fourth string on the depth chart at that place as well. And I'm just like, the money being tossed around is wild at this point. But I think that the Division I coaches, they miss being coaches. They don't feel like they're football coaches anymore, especially the head coaches, right? They've really gotten out of it. Now the head coaches have this whole other side with GMs and their cap analysts and things like that. And it's like, this is really what we've brought the NFL to Division I, which may be why at some point now you see more college coaches make the jump to the Division I head coaches because they're literally doing it already at the Division I level. They weren't. But when I see coaches like Chris Kleiman and Bobby Houck up at Montana State, and some of those guys that have been at places for a long time and are real strong coaches who care and make a legitimate difference in their players' lives, getting out of coaching way before they should. We're seeing Bobby leave a head coaching job that he's won national championships at to go be a coordinator in Division I school so he doesn't have to deal with talking to agents and things like that. I think that there's a reason to be concerned. I think there's a reason why those coaches are a little bit concerned. But it's also putting a level of cost into running a college football program. It used to be a lot. Now it's a crap ton. Like it is getting to run Ohio State or Michigan's football programs, Georgia's football programs. The amount of money they're spending on staffing and personnel is really unbelievable, and they're paying really well. Like this is hurting Division III. You're seeing Division II and Division III coaches leave head coaching jobs to go be analysts at the Division I level or to go be a quality control person or something like that. It's like 20 years ago, I would never have wanted to give up being a position coach to go be an analyst or a GA or something like that. And now that I've been a head coach, like part of me shudders thinking about going to be a coordinator again, like and not being the head coach. Like there's times I'm like, man, I don't know if I could do that. If somebody's telling me if I disagreed with it after calling the shots for 20 years, am I really ready to go be somebody's number two and have them tell me how to do it?
Yeah. Do you think that there's any world where that comes into our world in Division III? Do you think there's any way that trickles down
it's
to where
here.
It's benefiting? Yeah.
It's here. There's NIL in Division III already. There's at least 6 schools that I know of with confirmation from people within their programs and their department that have north of $250,000 to $300,000 of NIL money for their football program. Some for basketball, some for baseball. And the alums, one of the coolest caveats I heard though, somebody had $500,000, but $200,000 had to go to offensive linemen. And I thought that was a great caveat. Like that's a great, but the guy who donated the money was an O lineman. He didn't want to go to all those, the superstars. So, I think that there is, a lot of people think it's not here. It's here. And you're going to start to see a separation over the next probably 3 to 4 years, even more so than it was in the past. I think a lot of teams had started to catch up. The mid pack had started to catch the upper level teams a little bit more, creating closer games and competition. I think that you're going to start to see where those challenges of tuition costs start to no longer be a challenge for certain schools. If they're willing to put, $1 million in there or $5 million because that pays for 4 years, you're going to start seeing more teams in that private sector that have a lot of money that are going to be able to start purchasing their way into deeper rounds of the playoffs.
Well, I'm just starting to think, I grew up in Grinnell, Iowa. I'm like, they need to just take a little tenth of that endowment and go put it to the football.
Oh, they don't. We do not need to have that. And you and I both know going to basketball first there. They got to run the system. It's going to go there.
You got to pay 15 guys to all be like a starting point guard essentially over there. So
they're fun to watch. They're fun to watch.
They are. That is for sure. They are fun to watch. But so I guess putting a bow on this particular topic, how important is what you do and what the people do at the AFC board and the national level? Like, how important is that governance and that these oversight committees that are involved? Like, how crucial is that to continue to make sure that our sport remain and our division, our the NCAA in general keeps itself together?
Yeah. So I think here's what I'll say. I think at the Division I level, the football oversight is extremely influenced by the AFCA. Like I think football oversight at the NCAA level, when Craig Bowl or any of the members of our board of trustees walk into that room, it is gospel. Like they're out there making a huge difference. At the Division II and Division III levels, I still think the championships committee and the NCAA committees carry a little bit more weight than the AFCA does. And that's because our levels, think about a Division I football coach's salary versus athletic director's salary. Then you come to Division III and think about the football coach's salary compared to the AD's salary. The AD is going to be in a lot more of those decision meetings than the football coach is. I think that's where the AFC or the NCAA boards for our coaches. I wish more of our coaches would get involved on the NCAA level. That is the one to me that makes a difference. Now, when we have the ability to influence, I get consulted. There will be athletic directors that will call me as the board of trustee rep in Division III with Jeremy Urban from Trinity. I'll get the phone call to say, hey, we're thinking about this piece of legislature. What do you think is what we should do? But that's something we always remind guys at the AFCA every year is like, we don't make the rules for college football. We try to influence the NCAA. And that is getting into those rules with JP and some of the other people and saying, here's why, from a coach's perspective, this doesn't make sense, and trying to really make it better for everybody. So again, I do think it matters. I want more coaches that want to get involved. I think that the NCAA is a pathway forward for a lot of coaches to really do that. But I know that in the modern era, these last 5 to 6 years, the focus has really had to be on Division I football because every week there's a new lawsuit about something that they have to weigh in on. Player safety. I mean, we're so close to having summer OTAs for Division I football versus spring football. It's not even funny. Like we're so close to that, and it's just once they figure out the way to do it, the kids are already there. They're already with the strength coaches and doing positional work and all this other stuff. It's like, why fake it? Just go ahead and turn it into what it is.
Right. And again, I don't know. I believe it's public and it's common knowledge at this point, but the University of Nebraska, like Millard South kind of situation where the kid's like, he's going to go to Nebraska. He was in Chicago, right?
He was in Chicago. Catholic right down the road. His head coach lives about 5 doors down from me. So I got all this one.
Well, okay. So you get it, but I mean, if people are unfamiliar, I mean, he grew up in Chicago. He's going to Lincoln to play at Nebraska, but he transfers to Millard South to play at Millard South, but he lives in Lincoln so that he can work out at Nebraska, but then he's driving 35 minutes to an I don't know how far it is, but to go to Millard South in Omaha. And I'm like, that feels screwed up to me. Like that feels so wrong to have
But
that be a thing.
this isn't new.
Maybe I'm ignorant, but like that just feels so screwed up to me.
It's not new. I mean, Oregon was doing this with kids from Arizona a couple of years ago that are now playing in the NFL. They had basically 6 apartments that these kids and their parents could go move into, so they'd be at one of the schools close to the University of Oregon after being on state championship teams in Arizona and California. So this isn't new. It's just legal now. It wasn't legal.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: they could get this NIL money from a high school. That's legal now. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of the Division I football coaches talking to their state legislators to make this NIL stuff at their state level legal so that they can get their alums to start helping support getting kids closer to home where they want them to be. Like, hey, let's get the kid to Champaign and get him to this high school so that nobody else is coming to look at him. It's a lot harder for them to come find him in Champaign, Illinois than it is in, St. Louis or Indianapolis where the kid might be from. So again, you're going to see more and more of this. You're not. It's just wild. It's just legal now. It's all being stuff that was being done that we never talked about is being done and talked about because it's the kids putting it on Twitter because it's legal now.
And I'm sure with your relationships that you have in Arizona as well, you talk about Millard South, like that Millard South coach now at Chandler. I'm sure some of those conversations with some of those Arizona guys are wild to even. I bet there's stuff that you couldn't even imagine that kids are getting thrown around right now down there.
I bet if you looked at some of the Division I rosters and you went and you looked at what school was the kid at his senior year versus where he was the rest of his career, you'd see a lot of different ones. I mean, Dylan Raiola, who's the number 1 quarterback in the country, does that, right? He goes out to Buford in Georgia when he's committed to Georgia. Now he flips to Nebraska, but he went out for his senior year in Georgia. There's a young man that went to Mountain Point High School in Arizona who's an ASU commit, and so he plays the last half of the season there. And there's just a lot of that stuff's going on a lot, and I'm just trying to find one of these mansions in Lake Forest that we can turn into a house for our guys. I think it'd work out really well for us.
Yeah, you can make some really good stuff happen down there. But when you're overseeing all this stuff, and maybe sometimes you're seeing a lot of good as well, but you're also seeing a lot of wild horror stories at times. Does it change or affect how you run a football program as a head football coach?
No. It should be told it'll probably hurt us at some point, right? Because this is one of those few areas that I'm not willing to adapt in. I'm going to maintain relationships first. It's going to be a relationship-based experience, and it doesn't go well when guys come in with that transactional mindset. If they had it in high school and they come here and we haven't sniffed it out during the recruiting process, that is something that really just doesn't. It happened with a kid this year. I won't say his name or anything, but like his relationship with his high school coaches was so just, you do this for me, I do this for you. You do this for me, I'll do this for you. And I won't be about that lifestyle. It's going to be, if I've got guys on my team that aren't willing to give me a hug and say I love you or say what's up, coach, to me when they see me walking by in the cafeteria with their girlfriend, like then I know I've got something wrong there. I want to have that. And again, maybe I'm going to hold on to there'll come a time, right, where I hold on to the Division III of my experience and my goals. I'll hold on to it too long, and somebody's going to say, okay, it's time for you to step away. And when that time comes, I will happily step away. But, I'd rather be 7-3 and everybody on our team care about each other than, get a couple of mercenaries for 1 year to be tented up and then they're gone, right? They're there for a semester. We win maybe 2 extra games, and then those kids are gone, or kids come here and they foul out, or kids come here and they don't care about, the things we care about as a team. And now we've got to rebuild culture, weaknesses that we've allowed in. And, I would just much rather make sure that we build things the right way and bring the right guys in. So again, if it changes me at some point, hopefully it changes me to just continue to anchor down in that area instead of trying to do all the other things.
And I truly feel like that's the essence of Division III. It is the relationships. It is the, you're starting to see it. You're starting to see kids think that they are, that's how they should approach relationships, is this transactional deal. But I tell you, I'm sure the best teams that you've had, best teams I've been a part of, best teams I see from kind of a leaky faucet at times. Like the ones that are the best are the ones that are the most connected, and the ones that care about each other the most. And that's not how it is at Division One. Like it's just not. It's who's got the most money. But at Division Three, like I'll take the team that loves each other over even if I'm picking the team, like I'd take the team that seems to care about each other more than the team that feels like they're what doesn't stink. But that's just, I think that's the essence of Division Three. That's why I love it, and I think that's why you do such a good job of pouring yourself into this division.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I agree with you. And, I've been fortunate to watch a lot of teams on, being on the chair of the committee and stuff like that. The Luke Lanin, North Central teams, and even some of the teams that they didn't, that didn't win. The Wisconsin Oshkosh team that went to the national championship game the one year. Some of the St. Thomas teams up there with Coach Caruso. Like you see teams that genuinely care about each other, win, lose, draw, it doesn't matter. And the emotional challenge that does for them. I mean, we talk a lot here, and I just had a different interview earlier, and I talked about the choice to make an intimate relationship with somebody. And for a college football player, for 2 hours where you put your phone down and you're just with each other and you're doing the different things, and then you're in the meeting room for another half hour, the training room without your phone, and then you're at a team meal and you don't have your phone. Like the normal human doesn't do that in college anymore. Their phone's always up. It's always on. They're always got their mind somewhere else. And so for our guys to have that intimate relationship and to be present is something that for me is truly special.
Yeah, gosh, that hits it directly on the head, and I absolutely love that. When it comes to building a staff and developing staff beyond just getting them to be quality coaches to lead the pro, but to continue developing young men that are trying to rise in this profession. What do you think separates coaches that rise and those that maybe plateau or don't really see their potential?
Yeah, I think it's two things. It's one, as soon as you think you know something, you're wrong. Like you got to be inquisitive. You got to be looking for the other ways to solve problems. I think the other thing is as soon as you think that a job is below you, and this is something that I learned a long time ago from Paul Schaffner, who was the first head coach to give me a job. I'm watching him empty wastebaskets. I'm watching him sweep floors after we get done working out or before we get done working out, and things like that have continued to stick with me. Even as the athletic director, last night as I'm teaching my son a lesson, it's like, hey, you wanted this trip, right? He's like, yeah, you wanted to skip school today, right? I said, all right, it's time for you to get paid. You see all those cups right there? You need to throw them in the garbage. He's like, okay. Gets right up, throws them away, doesn't think anybody. He goes, so why was that? I go, well, that was because you got a $15 cheeseburger when we went to the restaurant before we came here and you don't have a job. So that was your job to earn it today. But no, I think that, coaches who think that there is a job beneath them at any point are the ones that really plateau. I'm a position coach now. I don't have to do the film cut up, or I'm a coordinator. I don't have to recruit as hard, or I'm a head coach. I've made it. Now it's my job to sit on top of the throne and point to everybody what they should do, not actually be involved myself. I mean, I got no problem unloading the bus after a game. I got no problem loading coolers before we go because I'd like coolers to look a very specific way because I'm anal about those types of things. But, making sure that, a coach is always seeing the next job that he could do it. He doesn't have to ask or tell somebody else to do it. I think those are the guys that plateau and always being inquisitive. We can all draw a play up on a dry erase board that'll work against a certain coverage, but what else do you got? What else do you have there? How do you develop yourself? Understanding players. I mean, one of the things we're doing with our coaches right now is talking about some of the behavioral studies that we've been looking into about, the mental motivation of some of the athletes, not just ours, but athletes in general, and then trying to apply that. So we're talking about that as a staff. I don't know that a lot of people are doing that. I think that, looking at some of the things that we do every year and saying, okay, just because we've been doing this for the last 5 years, is that right? When we got away from the Friday walkthroughs and moved to Thursdays and did fast Fridays and stuff like that was a huge change for us. But I couldn't deny the science and I couldn't deny what people were telling me. And I said, all right, we're going to try it. It was one of the best things we did. So it's just one of those things we're getting out of the way of tradition and how we've done things. Young coaches who are willing to look at it and bring solutions rather than just bitching about a problem. That's where it kind of gets a little bit different.
One segment we've been doing.
The FCC with that one. I let a little cuss word out there. My bad.
Well, yeah, we don't have any issues with that over here. But One of the last things that we've been doing lately is giving coaches an opportunity to point out some of the good coaching that you see, whether it's around Division III or around the country in general, whether it's from a leadership perspective, program building perspective. But is there anybody that comes to mind right away from head coaches, coordinators, position coaches that you've seen that have been doing a good job in your eyes?
Yeah, I mean, I have a bias here because I got to spend some time with them, but Joe Reich, who's the athletic director at Wingate University, and Rashawn Jordan, who's the head coach there now, he was the defensive coordinator. Their leadership styles are so different, and they've been able to show how to balance, a super fiery person and a very stoic person, and work together. And so when I watch how they work together, that's really impressive to me. I really look at that. Bethel University, up in Minnesota with their defensive schemes and some of the stuff that they're doing, and even some of their offensive stuff. I actually think they're one of the best special teams in the country. They get a lot of praise for their defense and their offense, but their special teams are really elite. You can tell they spend a lot of time on it. You know, I get to watch football and crossover games, and I'm always impressed with Wartburg, with the way that they fly to the football. They play Monmouth every year, the first game of the year, and I get to watch their film. And then I've had a chance to see them in the playoffs a couple of times, and just they're simple, but they're so darn good at it. Like what they're doing on defense, like I can tell you exactly what it's going to be, but they're going to out execute, out physical. They're going to do the thing to make their team successful. I think that's a really strong one. Joe Adams out at St. Anselm Division II. He does a really good job of caring about his players at the forefront. He really is another one of those guys that, big heart, puts his heart on the sleeve. He's a former Division III guy at Elmhurst. But what he does out there, I've been able to follow from afar, and a couple of my former players have been coaches on his staff. So I think that's been really impressive. Man, I could probably go through a bunch of them, but that's, I'm excited to watch one of my former coaches here, Luke Butts, down there at Westminster, taking over a program that was on the bottom, and the three-game win improvement in year 1 to 2, and if they keep that up, we'll be seeing them pretty good because defensively they're really, really strong.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I appreciate
the River Falls guys today. They've been getting enough flowers.
Yeah, I was going to preface. I was going to say you don't have to mention the River Falls guys if you don't want to, but it's okay if you do.
Well, but the place you were, Simpson, the way that Coach Hoskins and Coach Martinez, what they're building out there, and the improvement that they've made in a short period of time, we're pretty connected to them. My defense coordinator was with Coach Hoskins down at Illinois Wesleyan. Obviously, Coach Martinez was in the Midwest Conference for a long time, and I'm watching them build. I'm watching Concordia, Wisconsin build, another team that's using a lot of Arizona guys to do it. Again, there's just a lot of good stuff out there, man. And I think when you find coaches that have been a place for a while, I look at a couple of coaches, and Coach Walker's one of those guys, and Coach Etter out at Concordia, Wisconsin, and myself, we've been places for over a decade, and we've reinvented ourselves a little bit because we've had to find that little bit of something that served as a catalyst to more success. And I think that's something that, when I see coaches make those decisions, deeper into their career, that's something that for me is really, really special to watch.
Yeah, I think about those. I feel like every really quality head coach, maybe even coordinator, can probably say the same, but every single one of them has a time where they're doing something that they thought they would never do, because whether it just was unpopular or they just were stubborn. But I truly believe, like, when you can swallow the pride a little bit and say, you know what, like, this is not the way that we do things, but we're gonna switch it up and do this because we believe it's right. Like, that is far and beyond one of the craziest things and coolest things that I see. But I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I appreciate everything you do for Division III. It's always so fun to see what you're up to and see what Lake Forest is doing. And I just can't thank you enough for being a good representative of Division III and of college football in general.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate you jumping into the Division III, world, and on the media side now instead of as a player, as a coach. And so, being out here and putting a voice and putting some energy out there, I'm excited for that and to see how this continues to grow. So I appreciate you having me on.